Just a note here in the beginning, we had to record this discussion in 2 different sittings, so you might hear some difference in the audio quality throughout. So this isn't a normal thing. Don't expect to hear it in future episodes. They should be smooth listening throughout. We've been shit in the past, but we're trying to do better, so. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Unlivable Cultures. Unlivable Cultures is a podcast making with and borrowing from anthropology, social theory, and other forms of knowledge for a more livable world. My name is Cody. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a master's student in anthropology at the University of Iceland, and I am joined by my co-hosts.
Julia Coverdale. I use they, them pronouns. And I'm a current senior at Kansas State University studying anthropology and history with a little bit of queer studies on the side.
Just dabbling in the queer studies.
Yeah.
It's a nice flavoring.
Go ahead, Clayton.
All right, well, my name is Clayton Gerard. I studied cultural anthropology and queer studies, been dabbling a little bit with disability studies, religious studies, and that kind of thing. And my pronouns are he, him.
Yeah, since I want to be a dabbler too, I guess I can say, I also dabble in queer studies and a little bit of religion and spirituality, and mostly nowadays I dabble in environmental things because, since we're all dabblers here. And we're also all dabbers, am I right?
Don't do that again.
All right.
I think we should wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
We no longer know each other.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for listening to Unlivable Cultures. That was a good episode. Anyways, yes.
I just think it's so funny that our group chat is still called Unnamed Podcast, even though it definitely does have a name.
Yeah, that's true.
Just bad at commitment, I guess.
There was like a document that we had very early on that had Anthro Bros on it, which I think is really funny.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's funny too in the group chat when we were like, is it culture or cultures?
I mean, it could go either way.
It could. I just think that there's very different connotations if you're just doing culture.
We're all
versus
one
cultures.
culture. The
Exactly.
entire world is
Yeah.
one culture.
Yeah.
Hot take.
We are all one race, the human race.
Right. This is your history, so.
All right. Do we want to move on?
Yeah, so we landed on unlivable cultures, and with unlivable, with that word, we have this forward slash. Is that what it's called? Forward thing? Slash?
Slash, I think.
Slash? The hash slinging slasher?
I mean, we're talking about the bass guitarist of Guns N' Roses, just to be clear.
Or the hash slinging slasher.
Yeah, these are old man references. Or SpongeBob.
Yeah. Okay.
SpongeBob isn't that old.
I know it's not. I'm saying Guns N' Roses is.
Okay.
Well,
Good.
I'm sorry, but this old man over here just Googled it, and apparently / is the right answer, according to Wikipedia. So.
Yes, Unlivable Cultures is the title we landed on, and unlivable is kind of separated by this / as kind of a play with grammar to signify that we're talking about it as in potentially two different words. So unlivable being one word and then livable being another word. So kind of saying that it could go either way with that /. That kind of punctuation, that's kind of how I'm conceptualizing what this title can capture. And especially as we talk about various social issues and the different perspectives of like academic research or social theory or other lived and embodied knowledges and experiences can inform these social issues. At the core, we're talking about, things that make livable cultures or unlivable cultures. That's kind of my thinking through of the title and kind of why it appealed to me in the first place. Julia, Cody, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah. First of all, I really like the sort of angle you take with like the whole semiotic perspective, and we're getting into signs and meanings and linguistic playthrough, where I was just like, you know what? Like it could mean unlivable or livable. And like for me, with that perspective, the forward slash with unlivable is to like denote, although we're focusing on like unlivable cultures, you could say in a way a lot of our episodes focus on the negative sides of things. Like we take current events or things that historically have like contributed to things in the present that oppress people, and are systematic failures that contribute to making unlivable cultures. At least part of my focus too, and I think all of us have brought it up in our different episodes, is to try to point at things that can make our cultures more livable. It's to say that both of these kind of exist together. Our discourse today, a lot of like the way that we sometimes speak on social media or politics, seem to foreclose the possibility of achieving certain things and making things better. Or on the other hand, they're perhaps often too optimistic in that they're not addressing the negative side of things. We're just acknowledging they exist productively in tension with one another. And there's efforts by lots of people to make the cultures more livable, even as there are so many other factors contributing to make them unlivable.
I will say I have not thought about our name as deeply as I think you two have. We've been focusing a lot in this like kind of discussion about the unlivable part, and less on the culture part. So for anybody that doesn't know, we all are anthropologists that met through anthropology.
Not the store, Anthropologie with a Y.
No. Yeah.
Although,
Although
no,
what,
I'm kidding.
Cody?
Never mind. I was joking.
Just like in my fan fiction, it was an actual anthropology store. Because I definitely write fan fiction of us three.
That as a concept is so bizarre to me. What would you even write it about? Like,
We break into an anthropology and vandalize everything and take off the IE and replace it with a Y.
actually, that would
That
be a
is
great.
my fan fiction of the three of us.
Yeah, somebody needs to write that.
That's not
and it's
bad,
not
actually.
us.
Yeah, and just like picking off where Julia left off, like I think we purposely chose like cultures because although like in some respects with globalization and how the world has become connected, we do live in like very different cultures with very different world experiences, different worldviews, different experiences with systemic oppressive factors such as capitalism and colonialism and racism and homophobia and transphobia and all these other factors. So it's like it's acknowledging, although like we have common experiences, when we're all in this together. But sorry, that was terrible.
Yeah.
I should never sing again. And as anthropologists, like the term culture has gone through so many different definitions and has changed so much throughout history, because it's used to like refer to isolated sort of tribes where that anthropologists would go to and research and study, and they would say, this is a culture, this is, it has these like very clearly defined borders, it's this thing. And then like with that, there wasn't so much of a recognition of like the culture of the person coming and doing the studying and everything. So it was sort of just this thing that other people had. And that's changed drastically throughout the years, and culture has become this more like fluid and like harder to pin down term. So it's just kind of also, in my eyes, an acknowledgement of that, and just how different meanings, how many different meanings that the word culture or cultures can take on.
I also think too, like when we're talking a lot of the times for our episodes, we're talking about like some of the symptoms or conditions of different unlivable cultures. And I think part of too about like the choice of cultures also kind of helps highlight that there is not one right solution for like the entire world. You know, like what makes that culture livable for people is dependent on that culture.
And I'd also add body sovereignty and agency are values that I would dare to say we support. Just the practice of someone coming in and telling someone what is livable for them or not, or what is okay for them or not. We can think of dozens of examples of how that is harmful and violent in many scenarios. So opening that up to the individual level and recognizing your experience may be different than another person's, and that doesn't mean that your experience is invalid.
Yeah, I agree. I think like it is this idea that there are different unlivable cultures for different people according to so many different factors.
But I think also you kind of alluded to this possibility in the like unlivable word as we have it, in the sense that like unlivable with the forward slash forecloses some sense of possibility, just in the fact that livable can stand on its own, and kind of like livability can be unlocked within that word. And I think that kind of speaks to some of the possibility and positive valence that you spoke to earlier, is just that, you know, you can't have unlivable without the word livable kind of thing.
Where do we want to start with the trailer? At the beginning, maybe?
At the beginning.
Tell me, Cody, in your mind, what was the trailer meant to capture? Like, I was thinking something about like the essence of what it means that we live in unlivable cultures. Tell me, what were some of your thoughts and feelings and impressions going into some of the resources? And Julia just yawned. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'll shut up.
My thinking with the trailer, sort of motivation with it, was like, I guess, a combination of like, as you were saying, demonstrating and talking about, which I think is a lot of what you included. And what I like about it too is including like a lot of the stuff that's happening and like a lot of the different points we have kind of talked about in the different episodes, the different themes of what kind of makes this culture unlivable, and demonstrating the connections behind it. And like, but what I like, it's like, you know, all right. I don't know if I want to say this because it'll come off like, liberal inclusivity, everything's great. But like, it's just like, uh, ah, God. All right.
Just say
Just
it.
say it. Believe me, I am pretty generous on the editing table. Like,
As like, I don't know, as white as this will sound, I think like, to say that, it's such a diversity of voices and everything, like, different people sharing their voices and thoughts.
oh man, Cody. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I'm like, no. I don't know. Like,
No, I get what you mean.
yeah, I'll just stick with the original line. I think I was going in a better direction of that, of just like just illustrating from different perspectives the how the culture, like the cultures, plural, that we have, like, that we live in and have been made and have been kind of like, um although they're kind of made by one and the same force in many cases, have like become unlivable in different ways, but how these are kind of all connected. And I thought that comes through really strongly, in a lot of the clips that we use in the podcast. And then like, um this isn't like some of the inclusions that I made towards the end. I'm not trying to downplay like the first part of it and everything, but it's like, you know balancing a little bit the optimism, with the pessimism, and say like, as unlivable as the culture is, like there's still some like cool events, because I think that's the problem with trying to assert. If you just only focus on pessimism and destructive criticism, then it's like you never like acknowledge the real agency that people have and the cool projects that they're working on, and like the actual, things that people are trying to do to try to make the culture more livable. That's kind of my thing with the Zizek, Graeber, and David Foster Wallace quotes at the end, is to just, you know not completely leave it on a pessimistic tone, to give us like some sort of opening space from which to work upon. There's still like things that people are doing to make it less unlivable.
Yeah, I get what you mean, and I think there is a little bit of a difference in the way that I look at it because I hadn't
Ooh,
really
tension.
seen it as like a, like critical, cynical versus optimism binary almost, as like the first half being more critical and then the second half being more optimistic and the call to action. The negative things to me, just hearing them feel to be a call to action in themselves almost. When I was going through the different materials and like researching and going through different archives and stuff, like a lot of these things, they're pretty jarring to hear. Like Lauren Boebert on stage saying America is meant to be a Christian nation. It was founded to be a Christian nation. And like the unashamed championing of like Christian supremacy and Christian nationalism, which like goes hand in hand with white supremacy and colonialism and such. Like those kinds of things, it's like, no, this is so like wrong. But I think in a lot of ways, the context and the historical context of these like realities has been divorced from the ways that people are talking about them now, because from like the democratic liberal side, Christian nationalism basically means racist, but from the like Republican conservative side, it means just religious patriotism. And it's like there is a difference in the ways that we're understanding these words and terms, and so wrestling with the context with that this is happening within. So it's not just Lauren Boebert's comment about Christian nationalism, but it's also Billy Ray Belcourt's comments about colonialism and how that determines people's physical, biological, and psychological experiences, and how that determines the ways in which we're interacting with the environment and the climate and everything else. Like these aren't divorced from each other, and they do capture such different perspectives and experiences like on the individual and the collective level, from like people groups to countries to continents. But at the same time, we are all one culture, not really, but like we're all involved in this globalized system that we have now.
I think a really strong element of the trailer is all of the quotes that are being pulled. We talk a lot in our episodes about current events and kind of build off of that with theory. And I think that, it's really strong within our trailer to be pulling kind of these direct quotes, which is just something that we don't really do in our episodes.
The way you were talking about the clips, that does really strike through for me, especially like I really like the, I don't remember if is it South Dakota or North Dakota, the
South Dakota.
South Dakota, the quote about the like the statistic, what is it, I don't remember the numbers, but certain percentage of LGBTQ people in South Dakota like have depression. Is that it? Something like that? Oh, God, I can't remember it exactly at all. This is terrible.
So to give a little context for the South Dakota governor part, this clip was from a journalist who was at a press conference and asked South Dakota's Governor Kristi Noem about the rates of mental illness in the LGBTQ community. So he's like, he basically asks, what do you have to say about this recent research that shows almost 90% of LGBTQ youth in South Dakota are diagnosed with anxiety and depression? So the actual number is 87%.
Jesus, that's high.
Yeah, it's 63% nationally, and South Dakota's 87%. And this press conference was held like on the tail end of South Dakota just passing their like anti-trans sports ban and all these other things that are negatively impacting LGBTQ youth. And her response to that number, where the journalist asks, recent study shows that 90% of LGBTQ youth are diagnosed with either depression or anxiety. What are your thoughts on that? And she's just like, I don't know. That makes me sad and we should figure it out. And that's it. And it's like, the irony there is, I mean, there's no irony. It's just like, mind-boggling because we know why this exists. We know why there are disproportionate rates of mental illness for LGBTQ youth and people within the LGBTQ community. It's because of the society that we live in and the heteronormative, like cis heteronormative patriarchal culture that people are steeped within. And
And
then,
apparently South Dakota.
yeah, it's just like the willful ignorance, but it's not even ignorance. There's no excuse for it, really. Like, we know why these rates occur. We know what causes them. We know the ripple effects that they have. And yet, the governor of an entire state within the US is just playing this blissful ignorance of, well, we don't know. Maybe we should think about that. And that's kind of the irony and the frustration within this is because like people are intentionally creating unlivable cultures and then not recognizing and not being willing to admit that they're doing so.
My like criticism of it isn't necessarily of like the average person or necessarily like state um re- representatives or officials, but more so like the pundits on Fox News or Turning Point USA or within the federal government. Like at this point I'm a little less willing to believe that these people, or like libs of TikTok especially right now,
Oh my
that they
gosh.
don't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like that it's all fueled by ignorance.
This is real. Like, this is something people are actually saying. This is something people are believing or thinking about. And so it's just like, in terms of like being a call to action, being motivating, I think that's one's really striking. As well as the sort of John Oliver quote, which I think you still have in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought that
John
one
Oliver
was.
talking about data brokers.
Yeah, that one also just feels like some of them make you angry, some of them make you just like just flabbergasted at how ridiculous things are, and um, so it's not like a completely like dichotomous, like pessimistic versus optimistic. It's more dialectical, as we might say, if we were being
Oh my
pretentious.
gosh. Blech. Um, but yeah, so like with the John Oliver quote where he's speaking about like data brokers and how companies sell people's personal data to other companies, and that's how they make the majority of their money through disseminating people's data and like just selling it to the highest bidder. But for that one, it's just sad to listen to because it's like a reality that most of us are just resigned to, I guess I would presume say. Because on some level, we pretty much know that it happens. Like, what else are they writing about in those 50 pages of terms and conditions? But at the same time, we get upset about this if it's like a blatant thing, like for the suicide hotline selling people's conversations. Like, that is definitely a exploitation of what should be private. But like this, on the other hand, we all freely give it, which is very sad considering how deterministic it could be for our lives. But it's something that we're kind of resigned to. And then we look, and if we're going to get into anything about surveillance capitalism, like this is a huge piece of it. And there's hardly any way to chip at the boulder, it feels like.
And the problem is though, like people just won't ever get exposed to so many of them, just because the stranglehold that like the traditional media platforms that we think of hold on people, and like the fact that they're funded by politicians and corporations, and there's literally billions of dollars in these industries. So it's just like, if it just seems kind of daunting to like come up against. But that's like, I guess, also what I like about the trailer is because like it is like there are cracks. I think there are cracks in sometimes in the media sphere where things come through, and where things come through that they shouldn't have, or that like something just so ridiculous happens that no matter what like try to spin you put on it, um like just the sheer ridiculousness like usually comes through. So I think that's pretty well demonstrated in a lot of a couple of the clips included that we've been talking about.
One thing that I really want to highlight from queer Indian poet and activist Billy Ray Belcourt, who, when talking about futures and like futurity and indigenous people and colonialism, talks about how what is to be done when staying attached to life means staying attached to pain. And I think that it's a really evocative way to talk about the unlivable cultures that we live in and that are created for specifically marginalized communities. That kind of gets at the crux of like whether that's physical pain or like emotional pain or ancestral and intergenerational pain and suffering. Like this is very real stuff that we don't really reckon with on a collective level.
Suspend your. Oh my god.
Well, every time Julia yawns, we have to change to another topic. So
Okay.
I guess back to you, Cody.
It adds another 5 years to my life every time, or it takes away 5 years. Yes, every time.
I mean, I think if it adds another 5 years, that's even more torturous than
Yeah, probably. 5 more years in this unlivable culture. The one
Cultures.
culture. The one culture.
Like the human race.
You know what they teach us in anthropology? That there's a one culture.
We all bleed the same.
Anyway, sorry, you were going to say something about your hopes and dreams, Julia.
What a tradition. God. Transition. Jesus.
Wow.
Now it's a transition.
The real question is, do I even have hopes and dreams? And maybe the answer is no.
What made you want to join to be a part of this?
I think part of it was just like wanting to do kind of some more public archaeology and like more platforms to make archaeology and to make kind of that knowledge, as well as like discussions about decolonizing archaeology, like readily available, you know?
You wanted to be the change.
Exactly. Yeah.
Be the change you want to see.
What about you, Cody?
Because I'm a white man, and there's not enough white men voices out there podcasting and talking shit. So no. I think like for me, I'm just like a really big fan of podcasts. I listen to like especially I would say since moving here to Iceland, like just because I take public transportation a lot, or I have like sort of long walks to some places. I just listen to podcasts like a lot. I always thought there was sort of a gap a little bit with in terms of having podcasts that use or talk about anthropology, but also just kind of like making like talking about current events and things like that in terms of like social theory, but being like accessible and not using jargon all the time. Yeah, I'll just end there.
For this, I would kind of say a little bit similar to both of you. It is a lot different just talking about social issues and talking about different things that are happening in the world or in the news, and just the ways in which I think our academic training in anthropology and archaeology and queer studies and other areas kinds of has like primed us in some ways to pull from these various disciplines of study and various knowledge frameworks. And I think there are some really important contributions people have made in academia that can inform the ways that we're thinking and talking and acting out different issues and ways of making social change. And those are kind of conversations, like Cody said, that I would like to have in a more publicly accessible way. I don't think, the knowledge and theories of academia should be divorced from what is happening in everyday life. And I think there are interesting and innovative perspectives we can utilize when we're talking about different social issues and ways of creating social change. So I kind of wanted to be a part of this to have some of those conversations and test out different ways of thinking and acting in conjunction with a lot of the real world situations that are happening, and ways that we can kind of stress test some of these theories and see what works and what doesn't, and what approaches can be, more life-giving to certain issues, and like what ways we can more meaningfully engage in an informed way. So I don't know. Those are just some various thoughts and feelings that I'm carrying into this little endeavor.
Right. That's a great summary, I think. It makes it a good place to end the episode. So from everyone here at Unlivable Cultures, thank you for listening to our little teaser episode. Hopefully some of the things we talked about interested you, some of the topics that we talked about, why we're doing this podcast resonates with you and things like that. And we hope you check out our full episodes that will be coming out pretty soon. I think we're planning on next week releasing the first real episode, and then after that, we'll be planning on releasing episodes about once every 2 weeks. So be sure to stay tuned for those. And yeah, hope to see you then.